Welcome back again, everyone. And today we're going to unpack a new series on money. So I think those of you who have had a chance to work with me already know I'm pretty passionate about that right now because it has a lot to offer. And we can start right at kindergarten because that's where financial literacy starts. But it goes well beyond just knowing the names of the money bills and the coins. It really is a tool that we really want to integrate into our mathematics program as much as we can. So that's where we're going to unpack the value of money as a tool, not just as a currency. So let's begin with our acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are meeting from across Alberta on Treaty 6, 7, or 8 territories, depending on where you're coming from. And we honor and acknowledge all of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have lived, traveled, and gathered on these lands for thousands of years. We acknowledge that these lands are traditional meeting grounds, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation in a way that history may have forgotten. So as I mentioned, we are going to unpack what money is all about. And maybe just talking a little bit about with the students, first of all, what is money and why did it even come about? So from years past, and if we do any of our Canadian history, we can go as far back as when the colonial visits first came and First Nations met. There was a barter system that was put into place. There was the wampum belt that was used. There's a lot of different things that have been used for currency around the world over the centuries. And it's been consolidating into what we call currency that we have today in a lot of different ways that's happening. And even today, currencies will change in different countries. So simply put, money is a way for us to acquire something that we need, whether it's in the form of a trade, whether it's in the form of using something that we recognize it has value. That's really what we're trying to unpack when we talk about money. And as it says in the second paragraph, we've had everything from tea to shells to beans to rocks to gold, to you name it, has been used in the way of currency or the way to trade something of value. When we look at some of the things that have happened over Canadian money, we've seen a lot of changes in our bills. This is an old $1 bill. For some of you, you might be familiar with it, and some of you might, this is the first time you've seen it. But we don't have a $1 bill anymore. We have a $1 coin. Our old $50 bills used to have the king on it. So these have all changed. And again, over time, historical people change. And therefore, it's been tradition in Canadian culture to have our currency represent historical figures or current figures of our time. And so that's why we're seeing the changes that we do. We have a $50 bill that looks like this now. And that means it's not any less value. It just looks very different, has a different kind of coloring to it, also has a different person that has been featured on it. And now we're moving more to some vertical as away from the horizontal, still have the horizontal ones, but every one of our currency bills also is now found in a vertical form. The very first one to be that way was the $10 bill. So we see over time that things have changed. And in actual fact, the currencies, the paper money and the coins that we might have used in the past, the actual history behind our money was every province had its own banks and even had multiple banks in each province. And every bank could print its own money. So it looked different. So here you see one from the Bank of Montreal. And the Bank of Montreal used to have its own currency printed. And so people would use that if you belonged to that bank. Consequently, it became rather confusing when you would move from one province to another or you tried to move around. And so it says, and I just grabbed some of the information that might be helpful. In 1935, the Bank of Canada was formed and took over all of the currency. So they are the ones who standardized, this is what our dollar bill would look like. This is what our loonie would look like. This is what our toonie looks like. So We don't have individual provinces or banks any longer printing their own money. We also know that the penny was no longer printed after 2012, and that was because really it was costing them more to make the penny than it was worth. It cost them 1.6 cents to make a penny that was worth 1 cent. And quite frankly, there were lots of people saying, walking around with 100 pennies in my pocket, like you just collected so many of them. So they stopped printing them. And that's when we saw a little bit of a shift as well in some of the things that we used for our manipulatives. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in some of the other parts. But I want to be sort of clear on the fact that the penny isn't gone. It's gone from your pocket. You're not walking around with it. But what you don't see, maybe as obviously, is that everything is still calculated with the penny. If you go buy your coffee in the morning, it's not rounded for you to the nearest 5 or 0. It's to the nearest cent. If you paid for something, it's to the nearest cent when we add the GST on, and then we round to what we pay. So we still calculate with the penny, which is really important if we still want to talk about place value and use it for the hundreds. So I'm suggesting that we still use the penny and make that a valuable tool to us when we are teaching students how to do some of the addition and subtractions that we want to do. But let's keep going on the coins. We have all these different coins, and you don't see the 50-cent piece very often anymore, but it's still made. It's just, it kind of disappears. People hang on to it. But what I want to show you was that in the top 6, you see, we have the Queen on the back, and with the death of Queen Elizabeth, King Charles took over. So now we're starting to see coins with the king on them. But what I want you to look at really closely is that all of the ones with the queen, she's facing to the right. And all of the new coins now with King Charles on them have him facing to the left. You learn so much when you do the research for these short little blurbs that we do. And what I found out was that whenever there is a change in monarchy, so someone in the monarchy has died, someone else has taken over, eventually the currency will reflect that. And so every time there is a change in monarchy, the direction that they face on the coin must change. So the Queen faced to the right. King Charles faces to the left. When William takes over as king and becomes King William, all of those will start to face to the right again. Little bit of tidbit of information. And something else that I learned, and it had nothing to do with money, but we were doing some research for the CPAR documents. And the question was, if you have a 4-digit number, do you leave a space? Because we don't use commas any longer for our digits. We leave a space. But the question was, do you leave a space in a 4-digit number? So when I went to do the research to find out what are the rules that were put into place about spaces in numbers, and there's lots of pages of them from the government, here's some things that I found. So any 4-digit number has 2 options. You can write it with a space or you can write it without a space. If you write it with a space, you would read it as, in this case, 1,200. Makes total sense. It's the way you see it. If you don't put a space in, the suggested way to read it is 1,200, which also makes sense with the way it's put together. So it's only the 4-digit numbers that we have a change in how we might read them. Everything else, if you had 1,254, I could write that with or without a space. But I have 102,254, there's a space. There's no option to put those together. The other interesting piece was, as I was reading through the pages of legislation, it always kept saying, except for money, except for money. But there was no option to see an example. So I went to bank statements that are being pulled out from any bank anywhere in Canada right now. And lo and behold, money is the exception to the rule. So yes, we do use commas in money. So again, look up the aha moments that you see. So in this case, if I had $1,200 or $1,200, I would use a comma in there. And just to verify it from my own mind, I pulled out any bank statements that we had and I checked. And sure enough, there are all commas in there. And I had not ever noticed that since we dropped the comma. Never thought to look for it. So this is a screenshot from an RBC that was online and just enlargement to show you. So you can pull out any of yours, but money always has a comma. So in addition to this, I've also provided you with some videos that have been, over the time that we've been doing money with different groups, been really, really interesting, both for the adults and for the students to watch. How do they make our polymer money? What's so special about the polymer, that window that's in between? There's some secrets that you find in those. So all three of these videos are really appropriate for students. Very interesting to watch. I wouldn't watch them all on the same day. They're not super long, but they are really informative about our current currency that we're using, especially since they're gone from paper into this polymer. So just encouraging you to maybe use those at some point in time. So if you have no money in the school and you are looking, and I mean figuratively to use with the students, um, manipulative money to use in the school, there are a number of places that you can purchase it. Most schools have some, but just nonetheless, if you were looking for places, any of the ones that are on the screen, they're not the only ones. They're the more common ones, though, right now that we've been using. Spectrum has been very good to work with, in the sense that when we were building base 10 kits for money, they were very gracious in organizing larger bags for us and just selling us bulk volumes, because didn't always need more quarters and more nickels, and just to get rid of some of the stuff that we didn't need. They've created bulk bags for you of 1,000 pennies, 1,000 dimes, 500 loonies or 1,000 loonies in the bag, then packages of 500 $10 bills, and same for the hundreds and so on, so that we can build a base 10 system as well. So there's the mixed ones, all the coins included, and then other bags as well. So depending on what your needs are and what you want to do with the money, then you can decide from there. Are there virtual opportunities? Absolutely. And any one of these are great. I use Mathies and Braining Camp a lot. I do use Mathagon as well. The Mathies one is the one I use, especially when I'm making screenshots. So if you want to create something for the students, it's very authentic looking. It couldn't get any more authentic than that. Lets you really have an opportunity for the students to drag and put things into place as well. The toy theater is very simple images. They are just colored pieces of a rectangle with a number on them. So whenever possible, we're trying to make it look very authentic for students. So any of the top row ones would do that job for you. So that's kind of the introduction to the money and just some background knowledge that you might want to use. The next pieces will be that we're going to break them up into 4 different sessions, and we'll introduce sort of the knowledge of the money first, and then how do we progress and use them from there. So maybe we'll see you in another one of the sessions. Thanks very much.